Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. This is Jim McKeith, and thanks for joining us for this CodeRage session on VCL tips, tricks on Windows 10. On the call with me today is Marco Cantu.
Hi.
Delphi Product Manager. Thanks, Marco. And Ian Barker, MVP extraordinaire.
Oh, I've been promoted. I've now got extraordinaire at the end. That's fantastic.
So let's see. Let's see if I can share my screen really quick. So I'm actually in Belgium. Just finished the BE Delphi event here, which was fantastic. Oh, I can't share my screen. Dag now at macOS. So I wasn't sure if I'd be able to join in or not, and I'm here. But I'm going to share my screen and show the Embarcadero.com homepage. So if everybody goes out to Embarcadero.com, you will see the big news is we just released 10.3. So
yay, 10.3.3. Cool.
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. Very big news today. Just today, earlier today, depending on what time you're in, I suppose. So we can certainly, so the format for anyone that's joining for the first time today is really the idea is that this is a roundtable discussion, Q&A around the VCL, although since 10.3.3 is out today, we can certainly talk a little bit about that as well if anybody has questions around that. But so the idea is that there was a playlist that you received an email with, I'll put it in here as well again, so that you can have it if you didn't get it, that has all the VCL CodeRage sessions as well as some other VCL sessions. So there's a few sessions that were specific for CodeRage 2019, and then the rest of them are previous, like VCL tips and tricks, greatest hits, if you will. So the idea is that you can watch that session and then ask questions here, participate in the conversation around that. Okay, so Keith's saying that my sound is a little bubbly. I'm on hotel Wi-Fi, so I may disappear at some point, or at least sound bubbly or not great. So I will let Marco and Ian handle. Am I saying your name right? Is it Ian?
Ian, yes, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. It's surprising how many Americans call it Ian, but okay. But no, it is indeed Ian. You're correct.
Okay, good. I am always paranoid I'm mispronouncing people's names, and probably usually do. Okay, so we got people joining us from Italy, Brisbane, Australia, etc. So if you have questions around 10.3.3 Rio or around VCL, Windows 10 in general, go ahead and put those questions in the question panel. And actually, I don't know, Marco, do you want to share your screen? I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about 10.3.3 real quick before we get started here, or
sure. Let me grab a slide just that I have something to share. It's going to take a second.
Okay.
Well, I'll talk a little bit while Marco does that.
Sure, go ahead.
I can fill gaps. I'm very good at that. So 10.3.3 was released today. Marco's probably going to talk about that in a moment once he's got his screen going. For those of you that don't know about it, there was a public beta, and that's kind of the way things are going at the moment. Marco covered the big steps really of what was in that beta and now what is in this release. But the main thing being, of course, Android 64-bit support for Delphi. That is something that a lot of people have been asking for and commenting on. It also allows you to target macOS Catalina as well, which if you're doing iOS apps, then you may well be doing Mac apps to go with it, because that happens that way. For me, I did notice there was a thing about dark mode as well, which somehow I managed to miss, because my session for CodeRage this week, which you can see, I think it's been on the Embarcadero Twitter account and a few other things as well, was actually how to detect and respond to dark mode for Windows. So if you're not sure how to do that, then if you go along to my blog, which is code.show, that's a word rather than a dot, code.show.com and /blog. We'll put those links up later, but that tells you how to detect Windows dark mode. And actually there's a little bit more info in there other than just the video as well that tells you how to respond to the messages as well. So if your user's running one of your programs and they change to dark mode, you can actually detect that, and I explain how to do that as well, so that you can use the Delphi themes for dark mode or light mode appropriately. But 10.3.3 includes some of the dark mode information. And
yeah,
well.
but the dark mode information, the automatic switch to the dark mode we support is only for iOS. We don't have it for other platforms, so it doesn't conflict with.
Yeah,
with
well, if they go to my blog, they can see how to do it for VCL and Windows, and in fact, I will expand that eventually to do FMX as well. So, I mean, the great thing about Delphi is the theme support. So, it's not very difficult for us to have a dark theme and a light theme. So we're kind of halfway there already, and all this has on my blog there is a unit. It's open source. You can go to GitHub /checkdigits and get that unit, include it in your own programs, and hey presto, you can support dark mode in Windows. So without any work at all, it's literally one line of code to do that. So that's straightforward.
Fantastic.
Anyway, looks like you're ready, Marco.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go through a couple of slides. I don't want to hijack the conversation, which is supposed to be focused on VCL. And honestly, we don't have much on VCL in 10.3.3, not because we're not doing work, but because we have started doing the tenfold work for VCL, which is specifically around styles and high DPI support for styles. But again, that's a separate topic. So 10.3.3 focuses mostly having Delphi Android 64-bit support. This is by far the most relevant area and kind of the reason for this release. We've done macOS 64-bit support in 10.3.2 and now Android 64-bit support. And overall, the features are like everything that works on Android 32-bit should work on 64-bit. So there isn't much new, but hopefully there's nothing missing in terms of features. Now, we also focused on quality on Android FMX in different areas. And there is one distinct new feature which is tied to the 64-bit support, which is the bundle support. So rather than creating an APK and uploading it to the store, because the APK is either 32 or 64-bit, what you can do is create a bundle, and the bundle bundles the 32-bit binary and the 64-bit binary and any other resource files that's needed. And then you upload it to the Play Store, and when a customer downloads the application, he's going to receive only the bits that run on his device. And notice that unlike other platforms, where almost every device is 64-bit capable, I mean, iOS, macOS, Windows, Android is not really. I mean, there are a lot of devices out there that cannot run 64-bit apps. So if you go 64-bit only, then you're losing a lot of potential audience. So the other things we did, as mentioned, is the dark theme. So when application starts, it checks the platform theme, if it's light or dark, and then it switches, it goes, picks the right one. I mean, you have to bundle both, of course, but then it picks the right theme. Now, runtime switching doesn't really work out of the box, but there is a patch that we released today alongside with the product that does the runtime switching. So as soon as the customer, as a user moves to dark theme, the application goes dark theme on the fly.
Yeah, I installed the patch and it does work. Does automatically switch, works great. So very cool.
Yeah, it's just a single Pascal file you have to replace. We try to make it easy. And the other thing, we did some cleanup on Catalina and authorization support, but that was already part of the application. Now we did a lot of quality enhancements. across the product. Again, not much specific on VCL for technical reasons, but a lot of the IDE, compiler, runtime library, some performance improvements, and we fixed 180 public reported issues plus a bunch of other internal ones. So that's kind of the summary of the feature. We also did another thing, which is Docker support for RAD server deployment. That's worth a focus in its own. But again, that goes a bit beyond the topic here. So I think we should go back and focus on VCL and Windows 10 development.
So, what do you want to know? I think if people have got some questions, then they should probably ask some. Otherwise,
yeah,
we'll
just,
there are
questions, but I think the questions are really VCL related.
Yeah, I mean the advantage of the VCL, I think, for most Delphi programmers is that it's been around a very long time. It is obviously the original component set or component technology that was available. So a lot of if I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there like me that use Delphi from day one. I literally ordered it on the first day it was released, and still have the invoice to show that as well. And so most of us think, well, we know what the VCL does. But I think that's it's doing it a bit of a disservice. Certainly, one of the sessions I did recently was talking about things that are specific in the VCL to target things like Windows 10 and more modern user interface metaphors. Things like the card control, the multi-view control, and various other things like that. Those were not really. It wasn't a user interface pattern that existed back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And the good thing about the VCL is that it's kept pace with those changes, and you can still write a VCL application that definitely looks like it belongs on the latest versions of Windows. You can take a Delphi 7 app, upgrade it to 10.3, for example, and you get a free overhaul of the look and feel, and then you can add some VCL themes in fairly easily, just with a couple of clicks, and all of a sudden you've taken that old application and breathed a new breath of life into it, and that's something that's unusual. I think that the fact that the VCL is so stable and so well used, I think that's a benefit to Delphi applications. There's so many applications out there that just chug away in the background, and they've been going for years and years and years, and they do it without really crashing or having any sorts of conflicts with missing drivers and things like that. And that's not true of things like, for example, .NET applications and stuff like that, where a new version of Windows quite often means that the application has to be reworked and recompiled and relinked before it will function correctly, and that's not true of VCL applications. The way that the libraries have been implemented is
the fact that there's no reliance or a runtime or an engine, but it's just binary application that talks to the Windows API makes them very, very flexible, for sure.
Oh.
And it's true that all applications work, but what I want to point out that, and some of the webinars in this series were highlighting it, a lot has been added to VCL, and it's great to take advantage of it, whether it's new controls. I don't know. One of my favorite is still the relative panel, where you can put edits near and labels and edits and buttons like tied. I mean, with a position relative to each other rather than absolute, and it's great for resizing your windows in any way. Or whether it's the calendar and other new controls, or whether it's the extensive support for multi-monitor and high DPI applications. Because by comparison, most of the other native libraries, whether it's MFC, it's WinForms, or other of the classic UI libraries, their support for high DPI is really, really limited. I think we can always do better, and we have improvements planned. But I think the quality of the work, the per monitor V2 work that was done in 10.3, I mean, some of these things are really, really ahead of most of the other UI libraries for Windows.
Yeah, and it's a good thing, and it's good to be involved with Delphi in that way, because you know, the applications evolve with the customers. We find, you know, we're writing applications that go directly to end users. We don't have a nice walled garden of a corporate customer where all the applications are used in-house, and therefore people are a little bit more forgiving about things that don't work, because you've got a nice range of, everybody bought Dell, for example, in the company. With our applications that we write, they could be any kind of machine, quite often variations of Windows that have long since died. I know of a couple of people that still insist on running Windows XP for some reason. I don't know why, but it's something to do with the equipment they're using. And we cannot really predict what kind of configuration of computer someone's got, and that's the benefit for us of Delphi, that I can literally, you know, hand someone a memory stick, you know, a USB stick with the application on, and they can run it directly off of that memory stick, and it will work. No installation, no nothing. And that's something that is really almost a unique feature of Delphi, the runtime and the VCL. FireMonkey also, you know, I have to say I tend more towards FireMonkey now for new applications, just because there's not some nice extra little bells and whistles like animations and some cool compound, you know, creating a compound control with a button, for example, with a shape on it, so that you want to do a you know, like these red dots, like you get alerts on iOS. You can reproduce that on Windows in 10 seconds flat with just a couple of FireMonkey controls, and drop them on to each other, and off you go. So you know, I think eventually for me, FireMonkey would be the component technology I would use the most and by preference. But certainly VCL is very much alive and well and kicking, and with each release, you know, there's more technology and love being put into it, which is a great thing.
Okay, there's one VCL specific question, which is there any way to disable the use of themes if you want to apply specific colors to each element? Well, the answer is kind of. I mean, themes allow you to define like a consistent color palette that is applied to your controls. Technically, this color palette is in a single bitmap that is, it's actually a PNG, which is behind the entire theme, where the different elements are painted, and then from the single bitmap, the elements are displayed on the screen. Now, what happens is that, if you disable themes, you get the Windows look and feel. Now, on Windows, there are, the scenario depends on the component. I mean, some of the VCL controls are painted by the VCL, and of course, you can hook into them and do custom painting and draw them the way you want. You can also create your own T-Wing control or T-Graphic control descendants and do any graphic. Some of the platform controls, like menus, list boxes, and a bunch of others, have an owner draw capability. So you can take over and paint them. For example, not having, like, list boxes and menus cannot have text, but have purely a graphic. That's an all traditional Windows technique, but that applies to a few controls. You cannot owner draw an edit or a button. Now, there are other options, which is going in a little deeper, which is hooking and basically stealing the Windows procedure from custom controls and do custom painting. We do some hooks for the style support, but this is not trivial area. So doing like completely custom painting on Windows on the platform controls is fairly tricky. So it requires deep knowledge of some of these hooks and so forth. So it is technically doable, but it's not exactly trivial. One option is, with using the bitmap style designer, you can customize the theme or style and create your own. And the simplest way is take that bitmap, change some of the elements graphically on that bitmap, and then at that point you can have your own personal style with the graphical elements you want. You have blue buttons and green edits. You can do that bitmap style designer level. That's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, someone was asking, are we going to be showing any specific demos, or are we going to, quote, just chat about it? Today's webinar, I suppose we would call it, is intended to be a conversation rather than a demo. If you want to see more demos and want to see more things about what the VCL specific controls can do and things like that, then either go to the playlist, which is listed in the chat window at the moment. You can see it down at the very bottom, or you can go to the blog, which I've mentioned as well in response to that question, where there's actually a few of my videos that are very much specific VCL orientated videos and descriptions, and also there's some others in previous series as well. There was a Modernize series, and you can go there and there's an awful lot of stuff about VCL as well. So if there's something specific you want us to talk about, then ask us, and we can either talk about it or show you it, or do a video or blog post on it in the future. But we were intending this just really to be a chat, so sorry. If you
yeah, this is the format.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like the corrected team menu have become somewhat obsolete. So one of the questioners here, which is Chris, is saying that he believes that, I assume it's a he, sorry Chris if you're a female, that he feels like VCL applications that be created with T main menu and T toolbar tool button become obsolete. And what people are doing in terms of VCL UI design is to replace those. Well, I think that is true to a certain degree. The format for a lot of applications now is to not have a main menu, and instead have the user interface metaphor, where they have what used to be called an outlook bar down on the left, but now is a toolbar or a tab bar, and then you'll have some buttons that you will click, and that will go to the various functions of the program. The only problem with that is that it's not particularly usable when you've got a lot of features in your program. So if you've only got, say, 7 or 8 different areas that you can go to, including settings or something like that, then that user interface metaphor of having a button bar down the side will work. But if you go beyond that for something like an IDE, like Delphi, for example, RAD Studio, or even something like a web browser, you find that they're still supporting menus. You can do hamburger menus, as they're called, where there's the little stacked up lines, and support it that way, and even have custom menus. But if you're talking about a desktop application, then I think once you get to a certain level of complexity in the application, rather than a mobile application, then you're going to still end up with having some form of main menu, T main menu, and menus like that. If you are a fan like myself of Don Norman, who is the guy that wrote The Design of Everyday Things, or the Poetry of Everyday Things, I think was his book, he talks about hidden behavior being a bad thing. So, for example, right-click menus. If you have to right-click on something to expose functionality, that is an example of functionality that is not particularly obvious to someone. And I think if you try and do away with main menus and then put in this idea of, well, you should know to right-click on something on a desktop application, I think that's probably a bad direction to head into. It's a kind of black magic way
Yeah,
of doing
this is, for example, the split view demo that we ship. I hope you can see it. I think my screen is still shared.
Yeah, it's shared. I can see it.
And yeah, you have says a bunch of different options, and some of them are really ugly. Like this overlay, I think document sense. You can move it to the right, which is also quite ugly. And change the delay, change a bunch of things. And also, this also shows how you can dynamically change the style of an application by going over, in this case, a list of available features.
Yeah, and that's exactly the type of.
Another example that I think is an application you might be using, which hasn't got the traditional old style Windows XP look and feel, is Skype. The Skype, the Windows version of Skype, not the WinRT, but the traditional Windows version of Skype. It is still, as of today, a VCL application that does not use the traditional, menus and items. It's very nicely designed. Although I have to say that some of the UI ideas I really dislike as a user, but it shows how you can design a nice looking non-traditional UI, but still being 100% VCL, which is what they do.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing that back in the day when Windows Vista came around and things like that, there was a style guide from Microsoft that basically said, here is how your application should look, and if you want to get a Design for Windows logo, approved by Microsoft, then you had to adhere to certain style guidelines, and they even mandated what type of fonts you should use in order to qualify for the Design for Windows logo program. That's pretty much gone out the window nowadays, and you find that even amongst Microsoft applications, there's quite a diverse way of creating applications and the user interfaces, and some of them work better than others. And the idea of the hamburger menu, yes, is great, but again, it really is down to how many features your program is packing into one area. Mobile apps are a different idea completely, I think, and it's important for people not to try and make your desktop app look like a mobile app on steroids, because mobile apps tend to be easier to use and have less functionality than a desktop application. And I think when you start to try and put lots of little hamburger menus in there and icons that do a few things, and eventually you're going to get to the point where you've dumbed down your desktop application to a point where it's not particularly useful.
Oh, sure. Like to open Skype, you need to change your microphone, and you have to wander around where the heck they put the options, because they are hidden in an add-on menu to a menu, and you have to do 3 clicks to just have your mic working, which is kind of the most important thing in that application. Hey, my mic doesn't work, you need to fix it. That's what it is.
And back in the day, the Windows logo program did say where you should put your settings.
Sure.
And it also said you should have accelerators and on each of the menu options, and you should be able to use the UI with just a tab key and the keyboard. So things like that. Well, a lot of that's gone out the window for sure. The one that always kills me is Spotify, which has got a list down the side of all your favorite artists and playlists and things like that. And the size of that list view changes depending on which one you've selected. So if you select a particularly long playlist, the list box gets bigger. And then if you select a playlist with a shorter name, the list box gets narrower again. It's completely crazy. It drives me absolutely balmy, but there you go. It's one of those things. I suppose there's a lot of sinners out there.
This is Jim. I don't know if you can hear me or not. My connectivity is getting up really bad. I wanted to point out that Bruno is able to join us. He's online now as well. So if he can help answer questions. And
yes, I'm here. I'm hearing the conversation about design and styling. I think that design and styling is something very special, and it's very difficult to do it right, because you must have people who have really skills to do that, and I think that developers usually don't have these skills, and it's really difficult to get a really good design. I think that you can do a lot of things with simple components, even with bare components, but you need to think out of the box, and developers don't used to think out of the box.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually use TMS components quite heavily, and I recommend other people do as well, because you've got just so much of everything in there. And the one thing that you do in your component set is you have a component that is designed to unify the styles for example, all of the list views. I forget what the actual name of the component is, but you know, you assign this styler component to all of the other components that are understand that styler, and everything looks the same, which is a real benefit, I think. You know, if you've got 15 buttons, having to go to each one of those, and you know, I use the T glow button, for example. Having the glow button, getting all the grad fills correct, and all of the you know, on hover and on highlight and press down and all the rest of it, getting those styles to look the same can be a big problem. And like you say, it's one of the skills of some developers to actually be able to make a user interface look good. And I think your style component is a very good idea, your styler component in there.
Yeah, and one thing that I really agree is consistency. Consistency is very different to achieve, because usually you design one screen in one way and the other screen is completely different from the other one. I think that teams in Delphi relieves a lot of the burden of designing a good application and a consistent application for the developer, because one time he is using a team, the whole application gets consistent and have an appearance that looks good, and maybe it can look very different from the default. Yes, I know that many people start with T-menu and T2bar, and yes, that's outdated, but you must think out of the box and use the themes. I think the themes are great for getting consistency, or even go to a set of components like TMS, DevExpress. They have great components, and they have great arrays components. They have great components, and they can enhance a little bit the appearance of the application.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's important to notice as well that those component sets that you mentioned, the TMS and so on and so forth, are actually VCL components. And they're adding on top of the strengths of the VCL already. Stephen mentions in the questions there about they're using the TMS components for controlling the styles with TADV app styler, which is the component I was thinking of, where you set all the theme, the types of colors for the buttons and applications and things like that, and then everything points towards that app styler. I think the greatest progress for me recently was the VCL styles, being able to quickly choose some very good looking styles that have been professionally designed at Embarcadero by someone who is a specialist in graphics and isn't, presumably is. I mean, I don't know who designs them, but I'm assuming Serena has got some say in this, but whoever's designing those themes is doing a very good job. And it's very easy to make my applications look fantastic. People go, "Oh, I really like this color scheme you're using here." I've done nothing. I've done absolutely nothing there. All I've done is click on a button and say, "Apply this theme," and off it goes. And suddenly I'm a hero. I haven't really done anything. I'll take their money though.
That's great.
Okay, I'm answering like a ton of installation questions. I really want to bring them up because they're a bit they're a bit out of scope, but I'm filling them up in the Q&A.
Someone's asking here, is this the Windows 10 webinar? It's not really a Windows 10 webinar. It's about the VCL.
Yeah, but it is a Windows 10. Should be a Windows 10 webinar in itself. That's true.
Yeah,
that's the focus. And yeah, sorry, I can stop sharing the screen and probably get rid of that slide because yeah, that was just a short intro that we did.
Someone says they tried to use the bitmap designer to change the highlighted text color, but it doesn't work for VCL, but it does work for FMX. Is it a bug or a feature? I think that's probably one for Marco.
I should look to the specifics. I don't think. I think it should work. I mean, you cannot. The highlighted text is a Windows setting, so it's not per component. So I think you can change the highlighted text overall in VCL if you're using styles, and it should work. If it doesn't work, it's possibly a bug.
I think I've managed to change it in the past. I don't know. It's one of these things where you don't remember about it because you don't do it often enough. You've done it once, and
yeah,
that works, and then you forget. I mean, the biggest problem I have is not that I can't do something, but I forget how to do something. which property was it again? It was this one.
Yeah, the other thing that's important to note is that for most controls, there is. So the idea is that styles kind of take over, and then there is a property style settings that was introduced a few years ago, I think XC2 or something, and in that property you can determine if a control does not follow the style rules and does its own. For example, for the background color or the font or some of the other style elements. Style elements determines how you want to treat fonts, the client area, the border, and some of the features. If you want the
size,
standard
I
control.
think is another one.
Sorry?
Size is another one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, size is another thing. Yeah, but style elements is critical because otherwise, the behavior you were getting before, I mean, without styles, you're kind of losing it. So you customize like a font of a control, but the style wins. If you disable the style element, then the control setting wins. So that might take, again, it's not something new, but it was significant change that was done. And again, that when styles were introduced.
Yeah. I think I'm part of the Windows Insider program, and you know, I keep one of my machines. I always have on what they call the fast ring, and perhaps the weirdest thing is that I've never had a problem with any of my applications, the VCL applications. You get all sorts of people saying, "Oh, this didn't work and that didn't work," and so far, for every new cutting edge version of Windows 10 in the fast ring that comes through, my applications have always worked. So I think it kind of holds out my belief that I'm doing the right things by using Delphi and using the VCL. Are there any differences, that sort of the key difference really between VCL and FireMonkey in terms of requirements of the machines? It's really down to directorial or something, isn't it? I think that's about the only main requirement.
FireMonkey leverages the GPU more.
Right.
Some of this because it's using DirectX, so some of the graphic goes through. So if you have a decent GPU, it works better. But honestly, most of the machines have one that is good enough. VCL painting is still mostly GDI, although you can plug in a DirectX code. You can use the Direct 2D canvas rather than the regular canvas and do custom painting. But so it relies a little more on CPU because that's what GDI does. So if you're using a heavy graphic, FireMonkey is more efficient. However, it's true that because of its own styling architecture, FireMonkey is a little more heavy on the architecture compared to VCL. I mean, VCL for the button, you have an object, which is the button, and maybe a font and a bitmap and a couple of things. FireMonkey, the button is represented with a bunch of sub-objects that form the graphical element through the style, and so it's a little more heavy in terms of intermediate objects. But again, in most machines, it's barely noticeable.
Sure.
Okay, there was a question when using styles, when you're changing the styles, handles get recreated. Yeah, that's true. In many cases, because of how the system works, you need to recreate some of the not the Delphi controls, but the Windows handle behind the Delphi control. So if the specific Windows handle was passed to some Windows API or used or hooked to from externally, then reapplying the style, you get that done. The same happens if you're changing the border for the forms. At times handles get recreated, and in a few other scenarios. It's still not as bad as mobile, where when you're changing the direction of your device, I mean, everything gets recreated, like almost the entire application, which is weird, but that's how mobile works. On Windows, though, yeah, there are cases where handles get destroyed and recreated behind the scenes. And so if you do like any custom API setting, you have to reapply those settings. That's true. The other thing I want to mention, there was a question about a component not working, not working nicely with styles. I don't know about the specific. The thing I want to mention is that if you look at our roadmap for 10.4, the one that was published in August last year, we specifically call out a new feature related with styles, which is the ability of use what we call per control styling. In other words, you can have, rather than apply the same style to everything in your application, every form, every control, you can have a style that's used in a form, and another form could use a different style or no style. I mean, just a platform thing. But that's would be even true at the control level. So you'll be able to say, hey, yeah, let's use style, but this trackbar or this component, for some reason, I want the native look and feel. And you can disable style for that individual component. An example would be if you're using a third-party component that has its own styling logic, then you can mix and match VCL styles and third-party component styles because you just disable the VCL styles for that component while you use them for the rest of the application. That's going to be a significant advantage. It's going to offer way more flexibility than today.
Yeah, I think in my little demo where I show how I support or detect Windows 10 dark mode, it really does show the power of VCL themes. That it's almost one line of code, apart from retrieving the actual setting itself from Windows. Changing the theme from a dark theme to a light theme is a question of just calling one line of code. I don't know that there's any other languages out there that it makes it quite that simple. It's a real demonstration of the power of Delphi. I don't want to sound like a sales brochure here, but I suppose in some ways, if I like the product, then I'm going to say positive things about it. And I am a working developer. I don't think anybody should be under any illusions that there are some things that I would prefer to work in different ways and some things that I don't like, and I get to mention those. But overall, for 35 plus years, I've been a developer, and quite a substantial amount of that time has been Delphi and has been my main language. And the reason is the power of the VCL and the power of the runtime itself as well behind the scenes, and the language. It just makes me look good when really I'm just an average programmer. But I am a working programmer. I get up every single day and write thousands of lines of code. That's what I do for a living. Just because I'm an MVP, I'm not some kind of salesperson. I'm not an employee of Embarcadero either. So if anybody thinks we're kind of plants, that's not the case. We are developers. That's what we do.
Sure. No, the thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned that, I don't know if you've seen it published earlier this week, kind of an interview with Atanas, which was also my boss. But he's the head of our business unit, which is the entire Embarcadero / DevTools division in Idera. One of the things I mentioned, that what is absolutely unique is that Delphi is the only language out there that has language features tied to the Windows platform. I mean, we have a message keyword. I mean, no other language has it. All the other languages have their own way of mapping messages to methods, but none has like a language directive for hooking to the message system. That's really how extreme the Delphi integration is with the platform. And not only with the traditional Windows API, we have the best integration with COM. I mean, no question. I mean, if you look at the ATL in Visual C++, if you look at how .NET maps it, and how VCL maps COM, I mean, VCL has a wonderful COM mapping, whether it's for shell, whether it's for other services. I mean, of course, COM was way more important like 15 or 20 years ago than it is today, but it's still used. I mean, shell integration is COM. A lot of the APIs and features of the operating system are surfaced via COM. And then the newest API, which is WinRT, somehow is technically similar to COM. It has differences, but the invocation and the vtables are identical to COM. And in fact, we use interfaces in the language to map to COM and to map to the WinRT classes. So also the WinRT integration, which is like the new API of Windows, is completely done in a very nice way at the low level, at the platform / component. And then everything else on top of it becomes easy. And being native, it's all native to native, so there's no marshalling, there's no data mapping or even pointers mapping. I mean, we mean pointers. That's what they are. So the mapping that we have as Delphi language, and that's partially true in C++ Builder as well, is really a very deep mapping to the entire Windows platform, whether the old traditional APIs or the newer APIs, which again remain completely native. There's nothing that's not native on the Windows platform. There's .NET, but .NET is a layer on top of Windows. It's not Windows in any way.
Yeah, I think the thing is there's so many compilers out there that are trying to say, oh, we can do multi-platform and compile once and work everywhere, or write once and compile everywhere. With FireMonkey, it's not a joke. You can write an application that will then target Windows, iOS, Android, Linux, Mac OS with the same back-end code. You're probably going to change the user interface because a desktop app running on a mobile doesn't look right. There are, an iOS app and an Android app look very similar, and one tablet looks very much like another tablet, whether it's an iPad tablet or a Surface tablet, which I've actually targeted. There was an app I wrote a little while ago. They started off with Microsoft Surface devices, and so I wrote it to target a Microsoft Surface device. And halfway through the project, whilst they were trialing it, they had 500 nurses trialing this. They said, "Oh, we're going to start using iPads." And guess what? All I did was just slightly tweak the user interface, recompile, and it works. No change in the code. I did know that might happen, so I was very careful to avoid, using anything like backslashes when I shouldn't do and stuff like that. But it's not a joke when we say you can take a Delphi application, and if you're careful about how you write it, you can reuse that code over and over again to different platforms. That's a very big deal for a lot of people, including people like myself, where I make money from writing code and doing what the customer wants rather than do what I want.
Sure. I want to ask another question quickly. There was a question about T-Web browser. We know that T-Web browser is very, very old because it still uses Internet Explorer, which at this point is basically almost deprecated. We have been considering using the remapping the web browser to Chromium, which is what a lot of people are using, including Electron apps and other applications. However, shipping Chromium and mapping Chromium for Delphi are both fairly complex propositions, because if we ship it, you need to keep updating it and update for security fixes. And also the mapping is fairly complicated. The other option was using the XAML islands, which is one of the WinRT techniques to surface WinRT UI controls in a native application, like a VCL application. So that's something we've been researching a bit. But now Microsoft is going in a different direction. So they're actually releasing a new platform control for the Chromium-based version of Edge, the last version of the Edge browser, which is powered by Chromium. And so we are considering the ability to support Edge / Chromium from the VCL side. Now, no time frame. No time frame we can promise this, but it's something we are discussing.
Yeah, I think for me, the support of the Chromium browser would be a good thing. I really don't like the Internet Explorer
yeah, sure.
tie in. I think I'm probably not the only one who says this is not a good idea. Chromium yesterday, the Edge browser was released to market, I think, for all platforms. So I think there was a big trumpeting sound came out of Microsoft because they've just had Microsoft Ignite, and Edge is now available on Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iOS, Android, and I think there was something else. I can't remember what the other one was. But they really have got behind the idea of using Chromium as the engine for Edge, and I think that in itself is probably going to make Chromium become the de facto standard. Personally, I prefer Firefox as a browser, but I'm happy with the idea of Chromium being the rendering engine in most things.
Yeah, and if you want, you can also try Chromium, the Chromium Edge browser, because it's available on preview, and Microsoft has already released a version of it, and you can try it, and it works pretty fine.
Yeah, I think they actually released it to market yesterday for all those platforms. Yeah. That was their big announcement. I've got a lot of respect for Microsoft. They lost their way a few years ago, and I think they were not very popular with a lot of people. But since the new change of management in the last 5 years, maybe 4 years, Microsoft is not the company it used to be, and it's become extremely positive force for change. They still do things their own way sometimes and push their services in ways that are not necessarily a good thing, but overall they're embracing of open source, and particularly opening up to Linux and Windows System for Linux, and especially WSL2, which has come out, is a great thing. And I feel more happy to trust them, shall we say, when they release Edge and have Chromium built in.
Sure. We have 3 minutes to go. So, any other questions? Please put them in the question panel.
We talked them all to death, Marco.
Yep.
I guess we've covered it all.
Yeah, it looks like.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, people are saying thank you for attending and joining. Again, if you haven't seen, you should have seen the video before the webinar. Still see the video, and then eventually just send email or ask us for further information in some different way. I'm going to copy the link of my blog post about VCL overall and put it in the chat here. So in case you wait, okay. Yeah, that's the link to the blog post I did recently. Again, it's just a chat, so it's not very well edited, formatted, cleaned up, but it's just more of a conversation than someone transcribed the recording. But it again kind of weighs the value of VCL also compared to other options available for Windows desktop development, which are limited, to be honest. I mean, Microsoft has been neglecting Windows desktop development, say everything is on the web, but that's not really true. Now we are using web solutions on the desktop, like Electron, which I think is a bit extreme, and I honestly don't like when I have like 3-4 small tools like Slack or Twitter client or a couple of code editors and end up using like 4 gigabytes of memory for like showing a few things on screen. And I don't think that's really the way to the future.
Native apps are the right way to do it.
Native apps are useful. I mean, and shipping a browser and web server and a JavaScript client library and a JavaScript server library with Node.js as part of your runtime. That's not alone your application. So the runtime itself is half a gig, and then you have to keep maintaining, updating, fixing issues, and then server and JavaScript, server side and client side JavaScript all running on your physical Windows box. I mean, but yeah, I know it's a way you can use some of your UI for the browser, but I don't think that's realistic. But anyway, maybe it's just me because I'm too fond of Delphi and native code. Anyway, I think we can wrap this up. Thanks a lot for Jan and Bruno for joining. And not sure if Jim is actually online because he was having issues with the connectivity.
Okay, well, goodbye from Texas, everybody.
And thank you, and thank you very much, Marco.
Okay, and goodbye from Italy. Bye-bye. Talk to you next time. Thanks a lot.
Bye. See you.
Bye-bye.